Welcome to the Condor DM show out of order. As you know, this is not my main stream night for tabletop role playing game content, but when I have no other priorities and I have extended amounts of time, I can do these extra streams, right? These extended streams. Now, for the whole year, I have all the tabletop role playing game content planned out that I'm covering in my main stream on Sunday night. But this out of order stream is just like I said. If I have no other priorities or time, you get this. Tonight, we're going to focus on mega dungeons and modules. That's going to be a deep dive. But I've done a recent stream and some content on miniatures, and I want to do some extension on that. Talk about miniatures when they really became popular, a little bit more background just to extend that. So, if to understand the whole package of miniatures and where they are now, listen to this tonight. But it would be really good if you went back to the actual stream that I did focused on miniatures and TSR. This will be the part 2 of that, we'll say, right? Now, deep diving is extreme tonight. Mega dungeons, they're really important to Dungeons and Dragons overall. The history of these things, right? And I hear recently people are getting back into this stuff. So I figure, why not just do like the extreme deep dive on mega dungeons so you can understand. Understanding things helps you come up with ideas, like new ways of looking at the thing. And I'm going to provide you with facts about mega dungeons tonight, stuff you could take to the bank that will just help you overall understand what a mega dungeon is. Then we're going to go over modules. Really, I want to hype you up. I got a lot of stuff written down for this, especially for the module stuff, right? Just to give you an idea, like just how big the module catalog is for TSR, how extremely important that was to the Dungeons and Dragons franchise, especially under TSR, how much importance they put on modules. It was almost like realizing the customer wants this and then running in that direction right away, right? And mega dungeons, well, they had a big part to play in that. Now, I have so much content, like so much material tonight for this stream. I hope the stream is doing good on the technical end of things. I hope so. Let's hope that all works out. Man, I have so much here, honestly. So we're going to be a while, right? Out of order, you might notice I start a few minutes early, especially if I got extended content like this. I get so much to cover. I don't know how long this is going to take. I'm going to assume over an hour, going on 2 hours, but no plan, and I got the time to be here, so let's do this. Let's really do this. I hope you recently caught on my backup channel the stream I did focused on Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition. I'm very proud of that stream overall, as we'll mark that in the history books. For new people, I think it's a great way to learn what AD&D is, right? Just saying, my personal opinion, right? I put a lot into that. But I did the same amount of work for this, modules and everything, right? So what is a mega dungeon? Multi-level dungeon complex, persistent location. You return again and again. Non-linear exploration, factions, ecology, restocking. Designed for long-term campaign play, not meant to be cleared in one go. This is not a one-shot. This is not a 12-room adventure. This is a campaign engine. The Mega Dungeon is the original sandbox before sandbox was a buzzword. So whatever you think of sandbox, this is definitely a form of sandbox early before it was termed that thing, right? Where it actually starts. Pre-TSR roots. Before TSR published anything, the Mega Dungeon already existed. Important. Dave Arneson Blackmore, early 1970s. Castle Blackmore had a multi-level dungeon. Beneath it, players would descend, grab treasure, escape, return. The dungeon changed between sessions. It was persistent and evolving. This is a prototype. Gary Gygax, Castle Greyhawk. Gygax built Greyhawk Dungeons levels for his home group. Over a dozen levels. Each level had a theme. Diddly, strange, sometimes comedic. This wasn't a story module. It was a machine that generated emergent stories. That's going to be very important. That's what old D&D was all about. Not storytelling, but emergent stories from what you're doing, the activity. That model became TSR's foundation. Get it? It was a machine that generated emergent stories. That model becomes TSR's foundation. Fact. I'm focusing on that because this is important information. I want you to know where they were on this, regardless to opinions and even my own opinions. And if you notice some of these, I'm sharing the facts with you and even telling you at times I don't agree with everything I'm telling you. This is what it is. So I'm trying to be true to delivering the facts so you can trust that is what I'm telling you. And I'm separating my opinion and making it clear every time. Pay attention verbally. I always clarify if it's me or if I'm talking based on the facts of things that are, historic with TSR, the reports, the things we know for sure. Early TSR era, the dungeon is the game. 1974, Dungeons and Dragons. The original game assumes you have a castle. Beneath it is a dungeon. This is where a lot of people look at D&D and say dungeon underneath, right? Like this is the classic, at least, view. There later on, of course, this is all extended stuff. But at the time, it was simple. The idea of a dungeon was under a thing. You have a castle, beneath it is a dungeon. That dungeon is the campaign. No scripted arcs, no epic villain speeches, none of that attempt to story tell, right? You delve, survive, level up. The gamey focus was deep with Mega Dungeons and early TSR when they started on these things, right? But again, these Mega Dungeons are already being played before D&D is even out there as a thing. First published Mega Dungeon, Temple of the Frog, 1975. Often overlooked, very true. Large multi-area complex, early example of structured dungeon adventure. Still rough, but later standards. So this becomes a starting point, like a bit of a starting rough blueprint, but it's a very overlooked thing, right? It's not one of the classics. Look it up. Temple of the Frog, 1975. Mega Dungeon. Okay. I'm just making sure I have everything in order here. The first true TSR Mega Dungeon landmark, Tomb of Horrors. Now, this isn't a traditional Mega Dungeon in size, true, but it represents high lethality design, puzzle trap philosophy, tournament dungeon play, back to AD&D first edition, Gygaxian player skill over character skill, tournament modules. Remember, a lot of these modules are influenced by tournament play. Tournament modules influence dungeon design towards challenge structure and precision mapping. So again, some of these things can be somewhat carried over into the more casual at-home game, but it becomes a serious focus in tournament play, because tournament play is about challenging you to see if you're any good, and it is trying to be good as a player. It's a competition in that way. AD&D from the tournament side is a competitive game. The casual at-home game is a party work together team sport, but the tournament play is a bit of, there's incentive for you to outplay the person next to you. Classic Mega Dungeon model. Castle Amber. Large, weird, exploratory, layered environments, TSR leaning into high fantasy surrealism. Castle Amber, the mega dungeon that defined AD&D, the Temple of Elemental Evil. This is your heavy hitter. Why it matters. Multi-level dungeon complex, upper ruins, plus massive underground temple. Factions inside, elemental cults, politics inside the dungeon, designed for long-term campaign use. This is TSR saying we are formalizing the mega dungeon. It isn't just rooms, it's a living ecosystem. There's a lot, right? There's a lot, right? Underdark as mega dungeon. Descent into the depths of the earth. Vault of the Drow. These stretch to definition. Underdark becomes a mega environment, a multi-level cavern system, faction heavy, politically complex. TSR evolves from dungeon under castle to entire underground world. That's escalation, right? That is a big time change in the whole thing. It goes from it's just this to, man, we want more. It's always getting bigger, hence mega. There's a reason we even get to it, because it keeps wanting to extend itself out. Dungeon Masters were very attracted to this form of gameplay. Understand that. Even the guys who were designing the whole thing. Forgotten Realms in Second Ed era Megascale. Forgotten Realms in the Second Ed era Megascale. Second Ed didn't abandon mega dungeons, it reframed them. Ruins of Undermountain. This is second edition's Greyhawk dungeon spiritual successor. Massive multi-level dungeon. Hallister as Dungeon Mad Wizard. Very interesting person. Modular level design, designed for long campaign play. This is TSR fully embracing the mega dungeon in the box set format, right? It's like, here's a whole package for real. We're just diving in. But in second edition, it was there was very different approaches, varied in different approaches from second ed. My take. Key design philosophy at TSR Mega Dungeons. Player skill matters. Mapping, listening at doors, retreating. Resource management is central. Torches, spells, how much weight you're carrying, hirelings. The dungeon is a living place. Restocking, monster factions, wandering encounters. Non-linear layout. Important. Loops, secret doors, multiple paths. Death is real. TSR mega dungeons are not balanced. They are dangerous ecosystems. Just overall philosophy is, it's all about skill at the end of the day. So skill in every area. And understand that the dungeon is alive. That's the way it's meant to feel. Like if you stop, it doesn't stop. Like it's constantly moving. And if you're not moving at a certain pace, sooner or later, this thing catches up to you. Very important. Modern D&D adventures are often cinematic stories. TSR mega dungeons were engines. They didn't tell you a story. They generated one through risk. Again, story emerges from your activity, not that you were intending to tell the story. You're there to play a game. A story comes from what you do, like because you're using elements that create a character. Using elements a story can borrow from to become a story. But your purpose for the elements are to role play past the guard, to fight the thing. You are there initially in the mindset of you're playing a game. So if you show up to the table ready to tell a story, I think you misunderstand, at least from the Dungeons and Dragons point of view. This is my personal opinion. You misunderstand what this is. This is a game. That's what you're being asked to participate in. And the mindset that you're in a game is what you're expected to be bringing to the table. It's saying to you, if you wish to be an actor, go to an acting class, right? If you don't want to do anything in the vein of character build or anything, go back to wargaming where that's not necessary. Role play isn't serious, right? It's trying to say that this in itself has its own defined thing. And if you're looking for something other than what this offers, you've come to the wrong place. That's my personal take on what we do here. Just saying. That might bother some people. I don't know. It's just a personal take. Historical shift towards the end of TSR. By late second edition, more narrative setting. Ravenloft, Planescape, Dark Sun. Fewer pure Mega Dungeon releases. Shift towards story arcs and boxed campaigns. But the Mega Dungeon never died. It just became integrated, into the larger settings. So it wasn't the whole package anymore, but it was still there to be played with. Like it was like they don't totally ignore what these things are, or that you're going to use them. It's just not always the pure main focus. New focuses come into play during second edition, and they go after them. Arneson, Blackmoor Dungeon, Gygax, Greyhawk Dungeon. Original D&D dungeon as a campaign core, always. Temple of Elemental Evil, Super Module Dungeon, Mega Dungeon. Underdark modules expands scale. Just takes Mega Dungeon to Mega Epic Dungeon type of thing, because you're now caverns, layers, politics, factions. I mean, it exists in the idea that it can exist in the other Mega Dungeons, but it exists now in this epic thing that is now more like a small civilization under you instead of just a regular dungeon. And remember, note the under is so important to this brand of gameplay. Like, I understand years later, the extension of saying the dungeon's up in the tower. I'm just saying, for the mindset for many years, when you would hear dungeon in D&D, most of the time, a lot of people would assume you're talking about something underground, because that was literally the focus of either the underground mega dungeon or the underground civilization. But it was, the idea was, this is a world under your feet. Like, there's the surface world. That's what we call it, the surface world, the forest, the ocean, that, and you can do things with that, but it's the gameplay is developed in what I call the underworld. And the Underdark is the ultimate extension of calling it the underworld. It's like creating one, in the midst of saying, this is the gameplay. Let's create a whole fucking living place for sure that's real. It's not just the dungeons alive, the places. Okay. All right. Why mapping mattered in TSR? You're probably wondering why they do all this mapping stuff, right? It's so important. If not, you get lost. You'll get confused. You won't know where things are. It's not just mapping, but it's the information you're taking in. Why mapping mattered in TSR? In the TSR-era AD&D, there was no grid battle map assumption. There was no pre-drawn player map. There was no digital fog of war. The players mapped, not the DM. This came straight out of the Dave Arneson Blackmoor table, Gary Gygax Greyhawk sessions. One player was usually assigned the mapper. That role mattered. If the map was wrong, you got lost, right? Or even not. The mapper is almost someone who's recording information too. Like, this room is this, and it maybe a one word so they understand it's a this room or that room. But if you don't mark that, it's like, what room was that? Like, it's just so easy in the midst of your mind being busy to forget things. So recording the information of where you're going, mapping it out, and then adding little notes was so important. If you got that wrong, if you're the guy doing that, you could screw the whole thing. I've actually seen it happen go sour, where a guy who is just terribly lazy about the mapping thing. The Dungeon Master Guide makes it clear. The first edition standard is set in Dungeon Master's Guide 1979. Gygax explicitly discusses accurate descriptions of corridors, movement rates, in feet per turn. So it's not in yards, underground, so like, in the house, it's per feet, right? Time tracking in 10-minute turns. So, it's 1 minute round. 10 of those is a turn. Getting lost in complex areas. Mapping wasn't flavor. It tied directly to wandering monster checks, torch duration, spell duration, fatigue, time equals danger. Bad mapping, wasted time. Wasted time, more monsters, wandering monsters come at you. The place is alive. It keeps moving when you're not moving. You get a standstill, you're confused, you're lost. You back around that corner again, good chance you might be running into somebody, baby. It's not going to be good for you. That's the loop. That's all you just want to get moving. You want to get moving. Design tricks TSR used to challenge mappers. TSR mega dungeons were not straightforward. They used specific, I would say, like blueprinting, architectural tricks, angle corridors, 45-degree turns that mess with graph paper, non-Euclidean layout illusions, rooms that shouldn't connect logically, elevation changes, slopes, ramps, hidden vertical movement, secret doors and dead ends, punished lazy assumptions, overlapping levels, especially later mega structures. Example, the Temple of Elemental Evil uses a factional layering and complex lower level connections. Another example, Ruins of Under Mountain is deliberately labyrinthine mapping. Wasn't it? All right, let me get this word right, because I've had trouble with this word in the past. Labyrinthine, that's it. So deliberately labyrinthine. There we go. Okay, mapping wasn't just geometric or geometry, it was paranoia. Keeping up with my own notes here, baby. The philosophy behind it. Gygax believed in player skill. You can connect this to tournament play again. You always can. Tournament, people just, I go back to the tournament thing so many times because it was a real strong push with AD&D. It just never worked out, but you could just see the influence it had on everything that came after. In tournament modules like Tomb of Horrors, precision mattered. If you mismeasured, if you misinterpreted a description, you died. This reinforced the idea that careful listening and logical thinking are player tools. Mapping was a test of attention. So it's like, look, if you're mentally lazy, you're going to fuck up. These games want to put you on the edge of not being lazy, right? Old school was like the idea of new school where you have somebody with a phone that could be, doing things on the phone. Like that's just unheard of. Like the idea that you occupy your attention with anything other than focusing on the game was just like, I don't know. It was something we didn't have to fight with players to do. They would just play most of the time, right? You wouldn't have to worry about a player being half-assed. So I found some oddities when I got online where the mentality of some people on here changed the way they approached it. They become lazy. Just my personal experience. Graph paper as a standard equipment. Old TSR tables look like this. Yellow legal pad, pencil, eraser, graph paper. The 10-foot square was the standard mapping unit. Movement was measured in feet per turn. Exploration, turn 10 minutes. Remember, it's feet with inside, not on surface. That's yards. This made exploration feel slow, tense, deliberate. Modern tables often skip the entire pacing system. That changes everything. Pacing's so important. But it is different. It's a different game today. Mega dungeons are as spatial puzzles. Mega dungeons as spatial puzzles. The dungeon wasn't just rooms with monsters. It was a 3D puzzle box, especially in Descent into the Depths of the Earth, Vault of the Drow, where navigation itself was survival. You didn't just fight your way through. You navigated your way through. These games could be a meat grinder if you try just to run through swinging your sword. The idea of survivability in old school was you could do it, but it was a test of you. Like, that's the whole point. If you're not doing well, game is a meat grinder. If you're cautious, I mean, sometimes the dice can go against you no matter what you do. But the idea is there a good chance you can actually survive long term with the character? Yeah, and wise players would if they played cautious. They were careful, whatnot. Why this created emergent stories? Because players argued about which corridor to take, debated retreat versus push forward, got separated, got lost. Those weren't scripted moments. They emerged from space. The dungeon map was a story generator. Listen to this. The dungeon map was a story generator. You're not there to tell a story. It's a story of interest should come out of what you're doing, right? That is what you're doing. It's just emerging. It's natural because there's elements that you do related to storytelling, but you're not a storyteller initially. TSR Mega Dungeons weren't designed to be cinematic. They were designed to test your ability to survive an environment. Say it again. TSR Mega Dungeons weren't designed to be cinematic. They were designed to test your ability to survive an environment. It's a game. This game is not, I hold your hand. It's just a game. It's not there to play nice with you. It's meant to challenge you. So these games in that way can be very unforgiving. Modern players explore plots. TSR players explored space. Modern day players are focused on an attempt to tell a story plot. Where is this going? Why would this be? Their view of the situation is completely different, where a TSR player is in the place playing the game. What's around the corner? Like, it's more involved in what is there rather than trying to do something in that way. Instead of trying to create, it's just playing a game, and from that, something's getting created. That's a good way to put it. Why mapping faded later? By late second edition, more narrative modules, more story-driven arcs, less emphasis on strict time tracking. Yeah, the second edition starts walking away from all that. Less emphasis on precise player mapping. Not as important. It didn't disappear, but it stopped being central. Meaning, like I said, it stopped being the central focus. By second edition, they still respected Mega Dungeons and had their own take on it. But it was just no longer a real major focus of the TSR company at that stage. So it was an early focus. Now the game evolves, I guess, if you want to say it that way, goes in different directions. I don't know. I always thought that was okay. I always thought it was okay because I know customers who get mad, but I'd always think to myself, why not let them explore all these different areas and then do what a good company should do, which is go back in its origins. Like, it's make the old new again, right? Like, it's at one point get there, but you need a company to stay around for that to happen. And WotC just never took up that role. Like, in a way, I still think to this day, much of what they did was to separate themselves and say, we do something different or better, instead of saying we appreciate what came beforehand. So there was it was almost like celebrating the old was an insult to the new. And so for a long time, I felt like WotC was just never going to be the people that took the old and made it new again. And in the reselling of the books, I felt like that wasn't it. I felt like OSR, for the first couple of years that it was really hot, one of the reasons was it did what WotC could have done, which was just sort of take the old, put some new shit with it, and really try to sell that back out to something fresh. Just never did it. Never did it. Okay. Wandering monsters and mapping tension. TSR era, the core mechanic. Time is the enemy. In AD&D 1, as laid out in Dungeon Master's Guide, exploration was tracked in 10-minute turns. Every turn, you move cautiously. You check doors, you map, you argue, you search for traps. And every turn, the DM rolls for wandering monsters. Not maybe, not when it feels right. It's procedural, right? This is the way you do mega dungeons. Often in 1 in 6 chances per turn. That means the longer you take mapping, the more danger adds up. Like the more potential danger is coming at you, right? It accumulates over time, type of thing. Bad mapping, more rolls. Here's where tension explodes. If the mapper misjudges a corridor, misses a secret door, this is like not writing that extra information down, or misses stuff, like just, you know what I mean? The way they take it in isn't proper. Maps a turn incorrectly, confuses orientation, party waste time. Wasted time equals extra turns. Extra turns equals more wandering monster checks. So mapping isn't cosmetic. It directly increases encounter probability. That's brutal and elegant design. That's very important. The challenge is if you're not getting this done properly and there's mistakes, the wandering monster is there to eat you alive, right? The potential of them always showing up. So it's hard to heal up in old school D&D. So you definitely don't want to get caught up in so many encounters that you need to drag your ass out if you do survive out of the dungeon every so often, so you don't just spill over the next fight, right? Because the second you're down to like 2 hit points, 1 hit point, you're like damaged really bad. Yeah, it's wise. This is why you'll catch a lot of old school games where the guys are out camping literally for days out by a dungeon. Like days, just to get some of their healing back, especially the ones that don't have a cleric. So you always look at a group. It's like I get the inconvenience for some, I guess, in old D&D to want to play a cleric, but I look at the group and go, man, without one, it's gonna be one of those games. Resource drain is the real threat. Wandering monsters were often not treasure rich, not story important, not boss fights. They were attrition tools. You burn hit points, spells, arrows, oil, torches, healing, options, and you gain almost nothing. But that's the point. Mega dungeons like the Temple of Elemental Evil, Ruins of Under Mountain, are designed to grind you down over time. The dungeon fights back. That's the point, right? You go in, and the dungeon is going to try to start taking from you, including your life. That's the word. Including your life. Clear throat. Including your life. The dungeon fights back. Psychological pressure at the table. Here's what this creates. Players rush the mapper. The mapper feels responsible. Arguments break out. Do we search or move on? Do we retreat now? Every decision has weight because somewhere behind the screen, dice are being rolled. The invisible threat is constant. See, procedural means it's going to happen no matter what. You can't count on the dungeon master being nice to you. Like if you're just taking too long, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. And you're playing on an edge, especially if you're an experienced player that knows that this is the routine you're stuck in, the loop, as they call it. And that's what it is. It's a loop. It's a constant loop in and out. Wandering monsters make the dungeon feel alive. This is key. Without wandering monsters, a cleared hallway is safe. A cleared room stays empty. The dungeon becomes static. With wandering monsters, nothing is ever fully safe. Patrols move. Creatures migrate. Noise attracts attention. This reinforces the mega dungeon as ecosystem. Alive. Right? It can hear, it can come after you. It's not a museum of set encounters. It's a hostile environment. That means it's dangerous, right? And just clearing out an area, making it safe, doesn't keep it dangerous. The idea is this is always, as long as you're in there, your life is on borrowed time. Like, can you get out before you're dead or not? That's the idea. And most of the time, D&D assumes you're going to fail. Yeah, that's true. Most of the time, the game will assume a lot of failure in the process of what you're doing, and there will be a lot of failure. Tournament influence. Modules like Tomb of Horrors emphasized time discipline. In tournament settings, you had a limited real world time. This is the time, the real time thing is all tournament play, just like raw rules is written. Like the casual at home game doesn't expect you to use real time in this way. The casual at home game doesn't expect you to be doing raw rules as written. This is all tournament focused. Efficiency mattered. Carelessness was punished. That philosophy bleeds into the home mega dungeon. It, the philosophy of the dungeon is what's challenging you at that point at the common home game. Meaning it's not raw rules as written. The same pressure isn't put there, but the mega dungeon, the procedural stuff, still goes over to home games. So that's tournament pressure being applied to your common home game. That's where they're not loose, right? So again, this is where I tell you there's a frame for the game where there's an expectation that you still do these things 30% of what the game is. That's at home. That is raw rules is written, that 30%. But the 70% isn't. But within that 30%, you get things like how dungeons are handled, right? To be alive, these things are mandatory. The philosophy bleeds into the home mega dungeon. Precision reduces risk, sloppiness invites it. So it's old school. It's taken the element of tournament playing, saying, in the one area of the home game where you got to play good, right? To get by. It's definitely the dungeon play. You can be a little loose here, here, here. Once you enter the dungeon of a Dungeons and Dragons game, be it just a normal dungeon, mega dungeon, the idea is you're in something. You're in something that is just, it is the game, right? And if it shuts down in any way, it stops being that. So the design loop. Here's the loop you can outline. Players explore carefully. Mapping slows movement on purpose, even though that's not exactly what you want. You do got to slow down to take information in for the mapping. And the DM is going to time that amount of time you're taking to come. Again, this is where Wandering Monster, right? You can understand the pressure when you're trying to take all the notes and get it done really quickly so you can move on and not get caught up into that loop too many times, right? The end of it. So mapping slows movement, time passes in 10-minute turns. Wandering monster checks occur. Random encounter drain resources. Players must decide to push deeper or retreat. I told you when they're getting drained of the hit points, this is where you can retreat back to wherever you came from or just outside the dungeon, and that's where you're going to heal up, right? Again, all this is resource draining to make it harder for you to get over to whatever big treasure there is later in the dungeon. Retreat requires navigating the same map space. So mapping is important just to retreat. Just again, you go into the dungeon, there's a good chance you're not coming out, baby. There's so many things against you to get out, to do anything. The loop is the engine of the TSR mega dungeon play. So it's get in there and you're like this moving forward. And you're hoping not to get stuck in like just staying one place too long, because that's when the dungeon starts aiming itself towards you, like all of its attacks. So you want to keep moving as if you're in a constant area of traps, where the trap is, at least on the basic end, is you can encounter other things. It's not story first, it's survival first. So the focus of your character surviving should overtake any idea of you trying to tell a story with them. You can't plan for what's going to happen. There's no way to plan for what's going to happen next. The idea that you're trying to tell a story is just outside you. It's better just to let the story emerge from what you're doing and just play with your instincts and go with the mindset that you're playing a game. Wandering monsters weren't there to entertain you. They were there to punish indecision. So if you're a slow-ass player, here they come, baby. They don't care how slow you are. They'll eat you alive. The dungeon doesn't wait politely while you argue about which door to open. That's a DM was always timing you even when you thought the game was on standstill in the dungeon. Go ahead, argue over the door. Yeah, okay. We'll see how that works. Roll dice. Now I was someone who I did all my dice rolls in front of people, but it doesn't mean I would tell them what every dice roll was for, right? Because what's that for, DM? Who knows? Why modern play feels different. When modern games hand wave time, ignore exploration turns, skip wandering monster checks, the tension drops dramatically. Mapping becomes flavor, exploration becomes sightseeing, and TSR, exploration was combat with the environment. You were fighting, but it wasn't always fighting. It was fighting all the time. I mean, we're covering, this is deep dive stuff. That's Wandering Monsters. Now we're going to talk about light sources. Little things you might not think are so deep into what this is. How light sources amplify tension. Yeah, listen to this. How light sources amplify tension in TSR Mega Dungeon. Darkness was the default. In early AD&D, as codified in the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook, most underground environments are pitch black. Not dim, not moody, completely lightless. Humans blind without light. Even in infravision had limits. Short range, heat-based, not full detail. Doesn't read scrolls, doesn't show color, darkness is hostile. So in infravision, you can't read something. You can't even tell the color of something in the darkness. Like you could see the heat source of it, but color, all these details are just not there. So infravision would let you see stuff that was hot, but it's if the DM is just saying like you see the goblin over the thing, well, that's not exactly what you see. And you're meant to challenge players with the lack of detail on purpose. Right? It's at least they know something's there. It's better than not knowing. That I'll give it to them. And that's the, I guess, advantage with infravision, but it's not always this clear view that you get. Darkness is hostile. Light has duration, and it's tracked. This is where tension kicks in. Standard duration in 1E. Torch, 6 turns, 1 hour. Lantern oil, 24 turns per flask. Continual light, magical, but not common at low levels. Exploration is measured in 10-minute turns. So when you light a torch, you're starting a timer. And remember, every turn triggers wandering monster checks. So light, ticking clock tied directly to danger rolls. I think some of what you see with some of the stuff in the OSR and some other ideas come from actually being inspired by something simple like the light system, right? Ticking clock tied directly to danger rolls. So at turns where there would be like, your light could be getting ready to go out, and there could be a roll for wandering monster. So you're like lighting a new torch, and what if it lights back up, and you're like, oh shit, who are these guys? Like that would suck. That would suck. Okay, light makes you visible. This is critical. In a mega dungeon, you see 30 to 40 feet, but your torch can be seen much farther. So understand, you can only see so far, but your enemy way down a dark hall that you can't see at the end of could still see your light. So the light in that way is giving you away. Light attracts attention, especially creatures that, like might be, zooming around, not your typical on fours, like some big worm thing. And long corridors are something like the Temple of Elemental Evil, or sprawling areas like ruins of Undermountain. A moving light source announces something is here. Wandering monsters aren't always random. They can logically be drawn by noise and light. So you can just have encounter set up, but it doesn't always need to be a roll of the dice. Like it's just, hey, if the light source would get their attention, they're coming. You don't got to roll the dice no more. So illumination is safety and liability. So it lets you see the fight, but it can be giving you away to the enemy. Double blade, you know how that works. The fear of total darkness. Here's the psychological part. Picture the table moment. The DM says your torch sputters. Now the party checks inventory, counts remaining torches, debates retreat, worries about getting lost in the dark. If the mapper makes a mistake now, you might not find your way out before the last light dies. That's real tension. No monsters needed. Just the fear of the unknown, man, can mess with people, especially if they're taking everything serious. In old D&D, it's meant to put you on edge. So if you got everyone taking everything serious, you don't need a monster there. Just the mental fuckery of what could happen is going to screw with them. And that's a magical moment to see as a DM. Man, I've seen situations where I just send somebody somewhere, like a group, or they're going somewhere based on a job. And they get there, and there's not a lot of information provided to a scene they're going to see. They'll get some information, but the assumptions that I remember this early on as a DM learning, the assumptions people make, like the what ifs of the word, holy shit. Like they created a whole thing where I guess I could use it, and they'll give you advice like that. Listen to your players all the time. But at parts where you know the whole plan, you just get a chance just to listen to their paranoia. It's amazing. And imagine playing it under, like the paranoia under these pressures, even more. Whew. Fire plus dungeon equals risk. Torches also introduce smoke and enclosed spaces. Risk of igniting oil or webs, right? Because you know what I mean? There's all kinds of things that can just start burning. Exposure and ambush situations, again, giving yourself away so the ambush is even easier. You're holding a glowing stick. You cannot hide easily, so stealth becomes complicated. This matters in faction-heavy dungeons and Underdark-style environments like Descent into the Depths of the Earth, where intelligent enemies exist. They see you before you see them. Damn right they do. Resource stacking pressure. Now connect everything together. Light duration ticking down, wandering monster checks every turn, mapping slowing movement, spell duration expiry, cleric spell already used. Mega dungeons are about layer countdowns. Light is one of the most visible ones. You don't feel tension when a plot advances. You feel tension when your last torch burns low. When you have no more fire left, you're wondering, what the fuck do we do here? Right? Because it's like, shit, when this goes off, dude, we got nothing. We got nothing. Imagine you're not that experienced either, and you got really far into it. You got nothing, right? The DM is in your mind really well. I can fuck with your head. Magical light isn't a free pass. Even spells like continual light attract attention, mark you clearly, require planning. Higher level parties might mitigate light scarcity, but they never eliminate visibility risk. And in 1E, magic wasn't infinite. Very important. In TSR Mega Dungeons, light wasn't mood lighting. It was survival math. When the torch burns low, that's when the dungeon feels alive. Man, dungeons can be so scary. And if you're experienced player, you know the pressure of the DM is going to roll you through on this. You know it's real. Like you absolutely know. Like, we fuck around. We can this can really go sour. Like this is not a joke, and you'll know it. Man, that's good. It's good. It's good for your experience. I'm not saying good to like torture you mentally, but good to keep you on edge so you're focused on the game and not focused on being bored on your phone, right? Why this change later? As editions evolved, time tracking loosened, dark vision became stronger, resource pressure decreased, dark vision became stronger. Stupid. Should have kept it the way it was. I like the limitations to it. Hey, at least let you know something's around. I thought, okay, that's a pretty nifty fucking thing in for vision. But the details, no, I still like the mystery of what you can't see through it. I don't like dark vision where it gives you a bit too much. Resource pressure decreased. Narrative focus increased. The torch stopped being a countdown device. In TSR, it was difference between survival and death. You lose a light, you can die. Now we're going to talk about moral rules. Moral, like like how long can they stay there? Are they going to be scared? Are people tough enough? Are they frightened easily? How moral rules affect dungeon pacing TSR era. What moral is and where it lives in TSR era AD&D, especially as detailed in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Moral is mechanic that determines whether monsters fight to the death, flee, surrender, call for help. It's not optional fluff. It's a structured system. So this is really important. They get to a certain point. Will they keep fighting you to the death? There is a chance. Some. And these, the numbers are better if that monster would do it. If some monsters are more cowardly, the chance of you rolling it where they'll fight to the death might not be much there. They might flee, surrender, call for help. But it's not optional fluff. It's a structured system. Gygax explicitly pushes the idea that most creatures are not suicidal. That matters. Combat doesn't automatically mean total annihilation. Modern tables often assume every fight ends in a wipe. One side dies. TSR did not assume that. Moral checks commonly occur when the first creature dies, when a leader falls, when 50% of the group is defeated. Common sense shit, right? This means the fight often ends early. That changes dungeon rhythm dramatically. So imagine if, instead of just fighting to the death like it's a game, your enemies are surrendered. They're straight surrender. I mean, you could decide what you want to do with, but that can even become everything is meant to sort of like be interesting, fuck you, use to your advantage. Man, this game is so screwed up in many ways, right? Because the slowdown of that still puts you into the loop. So even though you might be taking a moment to decide what you're going to do now that the fight is like over so early, right? Or they ran, it's a weird dilemma because now you're standing still for a minute. You're using up time. Shorter fights, faster turns. Here's the pacing impact. If monsters flee at 50% losses, combat ends faster. Fewer rounds burn. Less time passes in 10-minute increments. That's true. So it does help that it ends early. Just don't fuss around at that time, which means fewer wandering monster rolls, if you're wise with it. Slower resource drain, because you didn't have to use much. You got these guys down. Like they quit before you had to drain a lot of what you had to could do. More rules, literally compress time inside the dungeon. But fleeing monsters create new problems. Here's a twist. When enemies flee, they don't disappear. They wander nearby. Like they go to nearby rooms, stuff like this. Alert factions, barricade areas, set later ambushes, call reinforcements. In a mega dungeon like the Temple of Elemental Evil, factions are layered and reactive. If a cultist escapes, the entire wing goes on alert, so moral doesn't remove danger. It redistributes it. It makes the dungeon feel intelligent without moral orcs fight to the death. Goblins stand in formation until slain, like idiots. Cultists politely wait their turn. No, they wouldn't. With morals, creature value survival. Leaders matter. Intelligent enemies act logically. The dungeon becomes a strategic space, not just hit point math. That affects pacing because players must decide, do we pursue fleeing enemies? Do we hold positions? Do we retreat before reinforcements arrive? More decisions, more time. More time, more tension. Stuff is so important to understanding, like, the complexity, the idea of the fleeing monster comes in. Like, if they surrender, you got someone, what do you do with them? If they get on their knees, if they go off and run away, what does that mean? They're still here. Like, so again, simulating real, meaning the reality focused part of D&D is there, regardless of the fantasy that we're messing about with. So the idea is if something runs off, it's not a video game. It doesn't disappear. You just need to have that common sense when you're viewing the situation going, okay, if it's not a video game, what would that mean? That's all you got to do. And then you start understanding, at least a better chance of understanding the situation you're in. If they ran off, it's like, okay, we could be dealing with shit soon. Right. Hireling moral matters too. So back in old school, because the game could be so challenging, you could go hire hirelings, non-player characters to come out and venture with you to fight, carry stuff, do all kinds of stuff. So their moral matters too. This is overlooked. The TSR torch bearers, men-at-arms, mercenaries all have moral. When things go bad, they might panic, drop torches, flee down corridors, abandon the party. Imagine this in a mega dungeon. Your hireling runs with your light source. That's pacing chaos. Suddenly, darkness, confusion, potential wandering monster check, party split, moral cascades into spatial disorder. So somebody runs off with your light and you're like, shit. Because you're like fighting with your weapon. So like, hey, NPC, hold on to the light. That guy flees with the light. What now? Run after him, right? Well, who knows what that means? Eating up time. Wandering monsters. Why this keeps mega dungeons moving. If every fight ended in total annihilation, the dungeon would become static. Cleared areas would stay cleared. Factions wouldn't react dynamically. Moral ensures encounter ripple outward. Factions shift. Safe zones shrink. This prevents stagnation. It keeps the dungeon alive between delves. So it's something is still actively going on. It's stuff can come back. Wandering monsters can come in. So when you come back in, there's still going to be crap going on. No matter what you cleared out, you could be walking into a new enemy. In TSR, monsters weren't hit point bags. Like, monsters were not like hit point bags. They were thinking creatures who wanted to survive. Moral is what stops a dungeon from feeling like a video game level. So the video game, you keep fighting the creatures, they die. The idea is this is a bit more realistic. And remember, it's simulating real in many ways. So real is you're going to have beings that want to survive like you. That means their actions have to relate with that. And that's what this system is covering. It's given them a system, like say they don't have a player. So the goblin doesn't have a player. It has a DM. Well, instead of making it that I have to role play the goblin the same way you play the player, I can use the moral system, right, to decide if they want to run off, if they want to do that, like let it make decisions for me. So in a way, I'm allowing the system to somewhat role play the reaction to you. Big picture, the pacing engine. Now connect everything you built. Mapping slows movement. Wandering monsters punish time. Light creates countdown pressure. Moral shortens fights, but spreads danger. This is why TSR mega dungeons feel tense without scripted drama. The pacing is mechanical, and that's why 1E veterans respect it. It's a game. They're there to compete with the dungeon, right? That's old school players liked the competition. They liked this thing. They liked the pacing, the be careful, the mapping. You hear them talking about it all the time, the importance of mapping in dungeons. Because they still want it to be important because they want to play that game all these years later. How faction design turns mega dungeons into political ecosystems. The shift from static to living dungeon. Early home campaigns like those of Dave Arneson, Gary Gygax already featured competing groups inside of dungeon spaces, but TSR formalized it. The dungeon wasn't room 12 contained 8 orcs. It became room 12 contains orcs who hate the hobgoblins in room 27. That's a different design philosophy. You say that again. All right, so it's like, room 12, or it's like room 12 contains 8 orcs. No, it becomes more real. Room 12 contains orcs who hate hobgoblins in room 27. That's a different design philosophy. Breakthrough example, the Temple of Elemental Evil. This is one of the clearest TSR examples of factional dungeon design. Inside the temple, air cultist, earth cultist, fire cultist, water cultist, eternal rivalries, corrupt leadership layers. These factions distrust each other, compete for power, sabotage each other. So it's like NPCs versus NPCs. Sometimes cooperate against you. The party can exploit this. That's political play in the dungeon. You can actually go, hey, Earth Cultists, how about we'll actually help you instead of fighting you, and we'll help you fight off the Fire Cultist or the whatever. Make us a deal, and then here you are now, instead of fighting an enemy, working with them. So even your cooperation can happen if you are exploiting the issues between the two groups if they're big enough. So that's political play inside of a dungeon. That's factions become that sort of politics and leaders and negotiation. The Underdark evolution, descent into the depths of the earth, vault of the drow. Now it scales up. The dungeon becomes city-states, noble houses, slavery systems, religious power structures. This isn't just room clearing. This is infiltration, alliances, survival through diplomacy. The mega dungeon becomes the underground society. Remember I told you they keep expanding it into something really alive? The Underdark is a great example of that. Why factions change pacing. When factions exist, combat is not the only solution. Players can negotiate, betray, spy, ally, play one side against another. This slows raw combat pace, but increases strategic tension. You don't just ask, can we win this fight? You ask, should we even fight? That's a higher level play. Because not fighting might actually, for real, be the best choice there, right? Like it turns the game into something other than you're just there to fight in some video game combat, right? Factions react over time. Here's where it gets powerful. Remember everything you've covered earlier. Wandering monsters, moral, time tracking. Now add factions. If players kill a patrol, side with one group, disrupt a power balance, the dungeon shifts. Barricades go up. Leaders relocate. Assassination attempts or assassinations happen. Alliances form. And mega dungeons like Ruin of the Undermountain, different creatures occupy different zones and react differently. This makes repeat delves meaningful. Delving back in, the dungeon evolves. Like it changes in so many ways depending on what you do when you have these politics to play into it, right? Political ecosystem versus theme park dungeon. Very important. Here's a sharp contrast you can use. Theme park dungeon. Fight set piece. Move to the next set piece. Nothing remembers you. TSR faction dungeon. Creature remembers you. Power shifts. Enemies regroup, allies may betray. This is not scripted narrative. This is emergent politics, just like emergent story. We don't go in to play politics, they happen. We don't go in to tell a story, the story happens. See, we're all here to play a game, but these are the outcomes of the game. That's what it's telling you. Why this matters for Mega Dungeon longevity. A Mega Dungeon must sustain dozens of sessions. Pure combat rooms burn out. Factions allow replayability, dynamic tension, long-term strategy, meaningful retreat and return. It becomes a campaign area, not a one-shot location. The big meta point, TSR Mega Dungeon design wasn't primitive. It was systematic, mapping wandering monsters, light, moral factions together create a self-regulating political machine underground. That's why the old school guys respect it. Because when you run properly, it feels alive without scripted plots. Let me say that again. Because when run properly, it feels alive without scripted plots. Properly means this is an area where some of the function of the loop is rules is written. That's even for the home game. Again, this is part of that 30% where, unlike tournament play where most everything is rules is written, the home game is 30%. This is within the 30%. Dungeon play is important. I'm not just explaining Mega Dungeon, but a lot of this is just overall dungeon play, period. Okay, this is the last part for the Mega Dungeon. Mega Dungeons, theater of the mind versus miniature play. Hear me out. TSR Mega Dungeons were designed in an era where mapping was player-driven. Miniatures existed, but battle mats were not assumed at every table. Early play around tables of Dave Arneson, Gary Gygax include both descriptive play and miniature influence from wargaming roots. The system can support both, but the experience changes. Theater of the mind and Mega Dungeon, strength, atmosphere, and tension. When you run Mega Dungeons, Theater of the Mind, corridors feel endless. Darkness feels oppressive. You control what players perceive. Spatial uncertainty increases paranoia. In modules like the Temple of Elemental Evil, the party doesn't see the whole tactical situation. They hear boots echoing because it's Theater of the Mind. They see flickering torchlights. Remember, they all have to be here picturing. They don't know exact distances. It's not like looking at the board. That amplifies fear in Theater of the Mind. Weakness. Precision can blur. Mega Dungeons are geometry heavy. With Theater of the Mind, flanking may become vague. Corridor width may be unclear. Line of sight may get fuzzy. Missile ranges become approximate. In tight 10-foot hallways, precision matters. If you're running 1E by the books, facing and spacing can matter. So Theater of the Mind leans harder into tension, but lighter into tactical exactness. Now, when it says by the books, it means the 30% that's expected. If you're running that properly, here's the effects Theater of Mind where it can be weak with the proper run of the loop, right? So Theater of Mind leans harder into tension, but lighter into tactical exactness. It's the other way around with miniatures. That's exactly what this is. It's more tactical focus, less tension. In Theater of the Mind, it's more tension, less tactical. Miniature play in Mega Dungeons, strength, tactical clarity. Miniature shine, narrow corridors, doorway choke points, cross intersections, multi-level chambers. When you put minis down, players see marching order. They see who blocks retreat. They see who is exposed. that makes decisions sharper. It makes the dungeon feel physical. This connects directly to D&D wargaming roots and the products TSR supported, especially in the AD&D era. So it has its benefits. Weaknesses: loss of unknown space, right? Here's the trade-off. When you put a map down, the mystery shrinks. Players see room dimensions. They see exits instantly. The unknown becomes measured. Mega dungeons thrive on uncertainty. That's why this can be bad. Theater of the mind keeps the dungeon abstract and ominous. Miniatures make it concrete and tactical. Remember, it's less tension, more tactical with minis, right? It's more tension, less tactical with Theater of the Mind. So that does come down to what you prefer there. How this affects pacing. Theater of the Mind pace faster to run small fights, faster to shift rooms, less setup time, more narrative flow, but harder to run large multi-faction encounters cleanly. Yeah, in the dungeon area with less open room, this can become difficult for a lot of DMs. Me personally, here's where I'm telling you the truth. This is the way they see it. This is the way they understood it, TSR. I disagree because I've seen people doing this stuff. But I'm going to put my own opinion aside and communicate what the company, what people were saying at the time, and not try to run an agenda on you. So at the time, harder to run large multi-faction encounters cleanly. That's the case. That's what the case they made. Can cause debate over positioning, miniatures pace, slower setup, more precise movement. Combat takes longer. It does. It takes longer with the miniatures. But fewer arguments, clear choke points, stronger sense of physical space. In a mega dungeon with tight geometry, miniatures can heighten the claustrophobia. You physically see how trapped you are. So it's one thing to not know for sure what's next. It's another thing to know how maybe screwed you are by being able to start visually seeing how trapped your character is or you can't get out. So that can be, that can be important. The psychological difference. Theater of the mind, we think something is around the corner. Miniatures, we can see exactly how boxed in we are. Both are tense, but in different ways. How TSR design supports both. Look at descent into the depths of the earth. Large cavern spaces benefit from miniatures. Look at Tomb of Horrors. Precision trap corridors reward careful spatial thinking, either carefully described or carefully measured. TSR didn't demand a battle mat every fight, but its roots in wargaming made miniature play completely compatible. No denying that. Mega dungeons are spatial engines. How you represent space changes. Fair, precision, speed, tactical thinking, immersion style, neither is wrong. They just emphasize different strengths of TSR design. So there is a design that leans into the more tactical, less tension miniature gameplay here. And then there's other places where they lean into the tension that pure theater of the mind would create outside of miniature use. So it's almost like the game is really saying, do whatever you want. And they think both are fine. They think both are fine. So far, I hope you liked the deep dive into mega dungeons. I hope most of that was clear and good so far. That is mega dungeons down to the core. I went over everything. Wandering monsters, the lighting system, and everything. We're going to move on to an update on the miniature topic, which I've been promising for a while, which is like a part two, an extension to the miniature stream that I did already. D&D miniatures. When did they really take off? TSR era 1974 to 1997. Niche but present. During the TSR years, miniatures were supported, they were encouraged, but they did not dominate. So true. Early D&D inherited miniature influence from Gary Gygax, Dave Arneson, because both came out of historical miniature wargaming. But here's the key. Miniatures were optional. The core AD&D books never required them. TSR supported miniatures in the 70s and 80s. Supported miniatures. They did support miniatures overall. In the 70s and 80s, you had Grenadier Metal Miniatures, licensed D&D line. Raw Pertha fantasy figures, TSR branded box sets of metal minis. They were lead and pewter, unpainted, relatively expensive, hobbyist focused. This kept them niche. You bought minis if you liked painting. You were already into wargaming. You wanted a visual aid, your character. But the average TTRPG group did not build armies of them. Not at the time. Some of them do now. Not at the time. Why they didn't explode in the TSR era? 3 reasons. Cost. Metal casting is expensive. Small production runs. No mass retail distribution. Hobby barrier. You had to assemble, prime, paint. That's a separate hobby. Playstyle. TSR Mega Dungeons worked fine without a battle grid. Mapping and imagination carried the experience. Pure theater of the mind. Miniatures were optional add-ons, not requirement. The real shift, early 2000s. The explosion happens after TSR. The turning point. Wizards of the Coast era, specifically 2000's 3rd edition D&D, 3E introduced precision grid combat, attacks of opportunity, flanking bonuses, measured spell templates. The rule system now strongly encouraged miniature use. Combat became spatially exact. 2003, pre-painted plastic miniatures. This is a big moment. Wizard launches randomized pre-painted plastic miniatures. Key factors: plastic instead of metal, mass production. Pre-painted, blind box randomized packagings, sold in hobby stores and mainstream outlets. Now, no painting required, lower cost per figure, immediate table usability. This is when D&D miniatures becomes commercially successful at scale. Not during TSR, but during 3rd edition Wizards of the Coast. When did they become affordable? Affordability improves due to plastic injection molding. That's Wizards of the Coast. Overseas mass production. Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast at first. Hasbro extends. Booster pack models. Distribution scale. Metal minis, TSR era. Few dollars per figures in the 80 money hobby. How can I say? So affordability improves by plastic injection molding, overseas mass production, booster pack model, distribution scale. Metal minis, the TSR era, few dollars per figure in the 80s money. Hobby level purchase. So it's not there, right? 2000s plastic minis, cheaper per unit, accessible to casual players, packaged like trading cards. The packaging model matters. It normalized collecting. Does it all relate? Yes. Three forces align. Rule design that rewards precise positioning. Manufacturing shift to cheap plastics. Retail model that encourages collecting. TSR had one partially wargame DNA, but lacked number 2 and 3 at scale. So the signs were there, but the infrastructure wasn't. See, it's the wanting of this was clear. The thing to make miniatures happen on a scale where you could say miniatures were part of the hobby, that doesn't occur until Wizards of the Coast in 3rd edition. The game is being tailored towards them on purpose. So this is intentional. Going to miniatures for Wizards of the Coast is intentional. right? So unlike where it's optional with the old D&D, it's becoming less optional pretty much with the new stuff, right? Though you can do theater of the mind, it's unique. TSR planted the seed. Third edition era industrialized it. Miniatures were always compatible with D&D, but they didn't become mainstream until the rules demanded precision and the manufacturing made them cheap. So they had to be affordable. It wasn't that TSR and Gary was wrong. Gary was right. They were just too expensive. It'd be a barrier to get people into the hobby, right? It had to be where it was affordable so it doesn't become a barrier. They make it affordable. When D&D miniatures became successful at scale, early 2000s, when did they become affordable for the average players? When plastic pre-painted mass market production replaced small run metal casting. Does rule design relate? Absolutely. Grid-based 3E combat and collectible style distribution created the explosion. So miniatures becomes a big thing in the Dungeons and Dragons world during 3rd edition, not during TSR. That's why it was pure theater of the mind was always mandated for old school. Okay. That's the update on miniatures. That's just talking about where they really become a thing because they weren't the thing that people want to believe they were in the old school. They just weren't. Pure theater of the mind was king, right? In old school, for the most part, was king. That was how most people were going to experience the game. The game in miniatures, it doesn't really come from the old school in that popular way. Miniature gameplay becomes huge in the early 2000s with Wizards of the Coast in 3rd edition. That's the absolute truth about miniatures. That's when they become affordable and people get them. It's no longer a barrier to people to get them, if they had to get them to be into the hobby, right? So now we're going to do a giant deep dive on modules. Whew, okay, I got a lot here. We'll see. I don't know if it's as much as the deep dive on exactly Mega Dungeons, but we'll see. There's a lot here. Okay, kids. When modules start at the beginning, TSR module began formulating in 1978. Before that, adventures existed in magazines. Home campaigns were unpublished. Judges Guild published early adventures, licensed, not TSR Direct. The real launch moment. 1978 tournament module adapted for public sale. That's why so many early classics S1, G1, D1 have tournament DNA. Modules began as convention competition material, tournament stuff. When they become retail products, this is huge. So the huge part for modules was when they finally step away from this, right? Like they're created to pitch another thing that ends up failing, but the modules in itself are popular. So even though the overall tournament play and all that flops at one point, modules are still in demand. Why modules changed the hobby? Before modules, you had to build everything yourself. I did that. After modules, you could buy maps, monster placement, story hooks, level ranges, professional layouts. This standardized play across the country. People in different states ran the same dungeon. That was revolutionary. This, again, like the tournament approach, modules and the tournament thing is to try to bring people on the same page doing the same thing. And the dungeon stuff, like this, playing the same dungeon, that's why the dungeons become raw rules as written even at the home game. So 30% raw at the home game. Dungeons, major focus of that raw ruling. 1980s, the golden age of TSR modules. This era gives us Giants, Drow, Demon Web Arc, Slaver's Arc, Temple of Elemental Evil, Ravenloft, Dragonlance Saga. Modules become narrative-linked arcs, super modules, campaign drivers. This is TSR at full strength. Late TSR-era 2nd Ed, shift occurs. Instead of standalone modules dominating, boxed settings rise. Forgotten Realms, Dark Sun, Ravenloft. Adventures become setting specific. Mega arcs decrease. Story-driven modules increase. Example, Ruins of the Undermountain. The format changes, the model remains, but the philosophy evolves. TSR modules began as tournament scenarios. They evolved into shared national experiences. And by the 2nd Ed era, they became story engines inside of boxed worlds. So important. That's right on. Now, I'm going to tell you. So I got into, this is some detail work here. If you don't know how big the modules are, what the modules are, the names, everything, and just how big they were and all the details to them, I'm going to go over just about every single module that exists for TSR. I'm even going to cover the United Kingdom's one, the UK ones, the everything. Okay. G1. Steading of the Hill of Giant Chief. This is where TSR proves high-level play works. G1. High-level play works. The party infiltrates a massive wooden long-haul fortress packed with brutal hill giants. Their allies, hill giants. They're allies and layered defenses. It's not polite dungeon crawl. It's a military strike. Recon matters. Noise matters. Retreat matters. The brilliance of G1 is that it feels like storming hostile territory, not cleaning rooms. It set up the epic escalation that defines the entire giant drow arc. So it's you're infiltrating, their defenses, like everything about them, and it is recon. It's sneaking in, right? It's a different mindset. G2, Glacial Rift of the Frost Giant Jarl. Now the scale expands. The environment itself becomes lethal. The Frost Giant stronghold carved into Glacial Rift adds versatility, cold hazards, and more organized opposition. It reinforces the idea that this isn't random giant activity, it's coordinated. You start realizing something bigger is moving pieces behind the scene. So there's an extension. G1, you get to the Frost Giants. So you start realizing you're not just running into random shit here. There's something really, really planned out here. G3, Hall of the Fire Giant King. This is the turning point. The Fire Giant complex beneath volcano terrain introduces intense resistance and the first heavy signs of drow manipulation. This is the important secret. The opposition is smarter, tighter, more tactical. By the end, you understand this isn't about giants anymore. It's about a deeper conspiracy. D1, descend into the depths of the earth. Now, you've heard me talk about this quite a few times. The campaign pivots underground into a vast underdark wilderness. There isn't a simple dungeon. It's a subterranean world. Travel becomes dangerous. Strange factions emerge, and the environment feels alien, the Underdark. It's one of the first times TSR expands scale from fortress to ecosystem purely. D2, Shrine of the Kuo-Toa, a bizarre religious complex devoted to alien fishmen, their strange god, and their strange god. This module stands out for atmosphere. Their cult feels truly inhuman, paranoid, fanatical, and unpredictable. It depends, I apologize. It deepens the sense that the Underdark is not just dark tunnels, but it's an organized civilization or civilizations. D3, Vault of the Drow. This is political dungeon design at its peak. The Drow city isn't meant to be conquered. It's meant to be survived. Noble hosts, assassins, intrigue, combat is suicidal if handled bluntly. Diplomacy, disguise, and paranoia defines the experience. Hiding who you are. Q1, Queen of the Demon Web Pits. The climax. Planar travel into Lois' bizarre webbed interdimensional realm. It's strange, surreal, and high fantasy in full force. TSR shows it's willing to break conventional dungeon logic and embrace cosmic scale. S1, Tomb of Horrors. The ultimate player skill gauntlet designed for tournament play. It punishes assumption, careless behavior. This is not fair fight module. It's a test of caution, observation, and paranoia. Surviving it is a badge of honor. Tomb of Horrors. Oh my, yes. White Plum Mountain. Weird, whimsical, diddly, a volcanic dungeon built around recovering legendary weapons. The encounter feels engineered. Puzzle rooms, bizarre creatures, tactical set pieces. It's Gygax flexing creativity over realism. Oh, it really is. Like all the puzzle rooms here and everything. It is the team and him really flexing their creativity and understanding their own game and what they want to put forth. So it's once you understand all these things, you can do amazing things with them. White Plume Mountain is one of those things. Expedition into the Barrier Peaks. Science fiction crashes into a fantasy. A crashed spaceship full of robots, androids, and alien tech. It's one of TSR's boldest moves. Laser guns meet plate armor. Love it or hate it, it's unforgettable. Alien spaceships, yes, unforgettable. S4, the Lost Caverns of, now it's pronounced two different ways, Soy Canth or Soy Janth. I'm going to say Soy Janth. I'm going to say Soy Camp. So Lost Caverns of Soy Camp. A sprawling wilderness to cavern expedition filled with demons, factions, and layered encounters. It blends exploration, dungeon crawling, and planar threats. It feels like a bridge between early tournament modules and later narrative depth. So it's mixing the two, right? T1. The Village of Hamlet, very popular one. Grounded, small scale, and brilliant. A living village full of secrets leading into a Mohos dungeon. It's a low-level play done right. Investigation, rumors, suspicion. It makes the world feel lived in before plunging into deeper evil. Yeah. T1 to T4, or I'd say T1, T4. It's a different part. The Temple of Elemental Evil. I don't need to say much over that. Mega Dungeon meets political ecosystem. The Rune Temple complex is massive, faction-driven, and dangerous. Cults, rivalries, layer levels, long-term campaign play. This is one of TSR's most ambitious dungeon structures, period. Really is, especially the early stuff, right? Ravenloft, I6, atmosphere over scale, a Gothic horror masterpiece with dynamic villain in Strahd. The randomization of key elements gives replayability. It proves a module can be intimate and character-driven while still lethal. N1, Against the Cult of the Reptile God, a slow burn infiltration adventure, a small town under subtle control of a negacult. It's investigative, tense, and grounded. It shows TSR could do paranoia without needing a 10-level dungeon. So, I explained how in the dungeon it can cause paranoia, you get stuck and everything, but in this, they're showing you they can cause some mind fucketry with just more simplistic things like a town investigation, what's going on, the creepy stuff. The A series. I'm going to some stuff here. It's A1, Slave Pits of the Undercity. Straight up assault on a hidden slave operation beneath a coastal city. Tight, efficient, tournament-rooted design. It's focused and dangerous, not sprawling. The real hook is urgency. Captives are being moved, the slaves. It set the tone that this isn't treasure hunting. It's dismantling an organized crime network. So this is slave pits, slime, slave criminal empire. Remember, slavery is business, right? And you're here to shut down a crime business network, right? To take them down. A2, secret of the slavers' stockade. The party tracks the operation inland to a fortified stockade. Now it becomes a strategic infiltration. Guard rotations, prisoner pens, layered defenses. It feels more military than mystical. The slave lords start to feel like a coordinated power, not a random villain. A gang, a group, not just some random, but like an organized thing, like just something that you know you're not up against just some normal enemy. More connections. A3, assault on Ari of the slave lords. Ari, whatever you want to pronounce that, of the slave lords. High risk strike mission against the slave lords. Mountain stronghold. This one leans hard into the daring assault energy. So high risk strike mission against the slave lords. Mountain stronghold. So this is when you're going up to their main fort and you're going to infiltrate, attack, or whatever. This one leads hard into daring assault energy because you're going on the attack. The upper levels are about direct confrontation, but the twist is coming. A4, in the dungeons of the slave lords, the infamous twist. The party is captured, stripped of gear, forced to escape. This flips the power fantasy on its head and tests players. It just tests players, like their will to keep going, their creative way to see around problems. Like, hey, you don't got your tools, now what, right? Survival without equipment is collapsing complex. Survival without equipment in a collapsing complex creates real tension. It's one of the boldest design moves in early TSR modules. So it's a module that just strips everything away from you and says, okay, dude, can you figure your way out of here without anything? That's TSR. That's old school, good TSR. The U series, Salt Marsh. U1, the sinister secret of Salt Marsh. Classic haunted house setup that turns into a smuggler and treat. It begins as a gothic mystery and ends in criminal conspiracy. The tone shift is brilliant. It rewards investigation and caution over brute force. So you go into something that seems like it's going to be scary, but it's more like Scooby-Doo. Like, there's the monster, take off the mask. Well, it is a criminal, but it's not really the monster. You get what I'm saying? Like, you think you're walking into one thing, but you're going to get it flipped and be into something else. U2, Danger at Dunwater. This module surprises people. The enemy, lizard folk, aren't villains in the traditional sense. It becomes diplomatic. If handled well, combat is possible, but not optimal. It's one of TSR's early examples of morally gray encounter design. So this is a weird module where you could end up fighting, but this is literally made to talk your way through. Roleplay. U3, the final enemy. A coordinated strike against certain forces. This one feels like a tactical mission. Reconnaissance, planning, and execution matters. It's not a wandering dungeon crawl. It's a structured assault. So this is you going up for the attack. It's going in to do battle. But again, it's expecting you to be smart about how you approach battle, not just you run in with a sword and swing. It's what are you going to do? Okay, this is a long one. Dragonlance D1 to D16. This series changed model philosophy entirely. DL1, Dragons of Despair, introduces Kryn, the War of the Lance, and the narrative-driven structure, pre-generated character story beats, strong emotional stakes. This is what TSR pivots towards epic storytelling. This is where TSR pivots towards epic storytelling. So this series, the Dragonlance modules, are meant to be epic, right? This is a more aim at not just emerging the story, but almost trying to create it to a degree. That's true. DL2, Dragons of Flames, refugee movement, military pressure, dragon army threat. It emphasizes war-torn travel and strategic retreat. So getting out when you can. DL3, Dragons of Hope, mountain escape scenario under pursuit. Survival and leadership become central themes. DL4, Dragons of Desolation, ruin exploration meets prophecy for fulfillment. Lore heavy, story critical. DL5, Dragons of Mystery, more source book than adventure, expands Kryn's geography and background, shows Dragonlance becoming a setting, not just a module chain. So this is developing something more. DL6, Dragons of Ice, Cold Weather Quest, Dragon Orb Lore, high stakes magical artifact play. DL7, Dragons of Light, Underground Resistance Movement. I don't know if you did any of these, but I have. Underground resistance movement, tactical operations against occupation force. So this is more the war roots, right? Dragons of War, full war campaign energy, battles, mass conflict themes, rising epic scale. DL9, Dragons of Deceit, naval adventure, expands the world geographically. DL10, Dragons of the Dream, surreal dreamlike adventures, one of the more experimental entries. DL11, Dragons of Glory, war resources supplement, introduces strategic war system elements. Oh, that's important. This is miniature wars type stuff being introduced into the Dragonlance story. That's when that happens. DL12, Dragons of Faith, clerical resurgence, and divine themes take central stage. DL13, Dragons of Truth, final arc buildup, uncovering secrets in the ancient truce. Dragons of Triumph, number 14, cinematic confrontation, full epic closure. DL15, Mist of Kryn, adventure collecting, expanding the world of Dragonlance. And finally, DL16, World of Kryn, further expansion, anthology. Dragonlance solidifies as a literary setting. So it's after this you start getting more of the stories and you'll get the box setting of Dragonlance. But this is what creates Dragonlance. This set of modules is Dragonlance. The UK series, distinct tone, often more puzzle-driven than story-rich. Hear this out. UK1, Beyond the Crystal Cave, romantic, almost Shakespearean. Combat is not the goal. Solving the lover's curse without violence is the ideal path. Unique for TSR at the time. UK2, The Sentinel, tight, self-contained scenario involving a magical gauntlet artifact, clean design, layered mystery. UK3, The Gauntlet, direct sequel to UK2, expands stakes and pushes towards broader conflict. So it's just expanding the Sentinel thing, right? UK4, When a Star Falls, strong narrative focus with investigation and artifact-driven plot. That's the extension there. The A series proves TSR could do high-risk tactical campaigns. The U series proves that TSR could do moral grade diplomacy. Dragonlance proves TSR could do epic narrative. The UK series proves that TSR could do experimental storytelling. Man, I've hit on everything. I'm on my last thing, I think. Yep. Here we go, baby. Second Ed era landmark modules. Ruins of Undermountain. This is Second Ed's mega dungeon flagship. Hallister's sprawling labyrinth beneath Waterdeep reintroduces classic dungeon exploration, but in a modular form. The difference from 1E. It's less tournament punishing and more sandbox modular. There is no tournament focus with second edition. So again, it's like everything else that second edition does. It leans away from it. DMs are encouraged to customize and expand, as we always are in second ed. It's Greyhawk-style dungeon philosophy filtered through second ed world building structure. Beautiful way to put it. There's a mindset with second edition that it's going to hit everything, and there's an expectation that you do whatever you want to a degree within the framework. Freedom. The first Dark Sun adventure sets the tone immediately. Gladiator focused, slavery, revolution, brutal survival. It's deadly and politically charged. Unlike earlier dungeon crawlers, this is about overthrowing power structures. It shows second ed embracing strong thematic identity tied to setting. Very important. Road to Uruk, war level escalation. This module integrates mass combat, and city politics. Sorry. It reflects second edition growing interest in more scale consequences rather than isolated dungeon delves. Second ed does start moving away from dungeons in many ways and going after other types of outcomes, and this is part of its aim. Feast of the Goblins, the defining Ravenloft adventure of the second ed era. Gothic horror, tragic villains, moral ambiguity. It emphasizes atmosphere and character emotion over dungeon geometry. This is second ed mood. This is second ed mood design at its strongest. So it's the way second ed takes things in. It's in the Feast of the Goblins. It's really showing itself. The difference between that and the earlier stuff, right? The Host of Strahd. The second ed reinterpretation of Ravenloft's original module. It refines Strahd's character and deepens Gothic narrative elements. Less tournament puzzle box. Makes sense. More tragic villain centerpiece. As I covered when I covered Ravenloft for second edition. You know this stuff already if you've been following that stuff I did. The Eternal Boundary. Planescape shifts the focus entirely. Philosophy over treasure. Belief shapes reality. This module introduces players to Sigel's faction and planner politics. Combat matters less than ideological alignment. So, what side you're on, right? Gate Gods, one of TSR's last great epics. High-level planner investigation tied to divine corpses and cosmic mystery. Dense lore, layered politics, and big existential stakes. This is second edition ambition at full power near company's end, near the end of TSR. Dragon Mountain, a return to large-scale dungeon design in second edition. A massive kobold stronghold with traps, vertical complexity. It feels like TSR revisiting old mega-structure energy, but with second edition production style and humor. See, second edition was trying to separate itself a bit from the other stuff previous to it, and so it tried to bring its own elements to everything it was doing. The Night Below, a full campaign arc starting with a small town mystery and expanding into a massive Underdark invasion storyline. It blends investigation, wilderness, dungeon, and high-level climax. This is one of the strongest examples of second ed long-form campaign designs. Last couple of things. The Night of the Shark, a realm adventure that blends investigation into nautical danger. It shows how second ed realms modules lean towards immersive local storytelling rather than pure dungeon grind. What defines second ed modules? Strong setting identity, narrative-driven arcs, political themes, philosophy themes, less tournament lethality, more box set integration. 1E modules often feel like, here is your challenge. Second ed modules often feel like, here is the world. If 1E modules were about surviving the dungeon, second ed modules were about surviving the setting, the world, the place. That's when dungeon becomes a little less important than everything. And there you go. Tonight's an hour and 48-minute deep dive on Mega Dungeons. I hope the connection was good. I hope I listened back and this was all right. Mega Dungeons, my miniature update, and then we jumped into modules, man. And I think I read you every single module title and a pitch for it so you can understand just how big it was, man. To go through a list of them like that and then just I had to come up with like things for each one. How would I describe this? Well, you got my best takes on them. Some I only ever read and I never played or even went beyond something like just even messing with them. So I had to take it off some assumption. I admit some of them I've had some experience with, not much. I never ran them myself, but I played modules that other people ran. So it's all from that viewpoint with the modules. But I think I did a good job because I took this to someone who's ran mostly every module and I said, is this good enough? Like, would you at least not be mad at me as a nerd if I said this stuff about these modules? He says, no, everything I'm saying is fine. So I hope it sells the modules well, and it gives you an idea of just how big the list of them and how big of an issue modules were, third-party adventures, or just, these extra pre-made adventures were to the game. But it comes from tournament play. It's just more about, it's just, you have to keep bringing up tournament play with old AD&D 1 because you can't get around it. It was such a centerpiece for what they thought it could be. And it just never ended up being that, right? Anyway, I hope whoever gets to see this enjoys it. And tomorrow night it's going to be Birthright. Deep dive on just Birthright. Not 3 topics, just Birthright. There's a chance I might not have gotten to talk about these things like at another point. So I'm happy we got this stream done. Almost 2 hours. Mega dungeons are right now a focus. So I noticed people talking about them. So I'm like, let's get people inspired. Let's let them know where it came from, why it exists. And if you're going to play with old school, understand, there is some raw, but raw rules is written only really is focused on 30% of AD&D 1. So if you're doing home game compared to tournament play. And I just need to keep drilling that because I think so many people out there pitch AD&D 1 to be something it's not at home. I'm like, dude, the way you pitch it is an expectation that people play tournament play at home. The reason we have tournament play is just to make sure everyone's doing the same thing, but it's not necessary in reality. Now, the pressure of that goes off at your home game. Now, I think Gary and the company understood that was a wise move. Put the pressure to get everyone playing the same thing at tournament, but it's like Rust. There's a video game called Rust that I love. There is PvP, there are official servers, and then there's these other places where you can go do PvE. Like try the game in different ways. Like PvP is your challenge heavy, go be the Chad Alpha playing the game, right? Or you can go play PvE and not be the Chad Alpha. My point is the hardcore competition of tournament play wasn't necessary at home. And that was always clear. And I think it's such an important detail, but it's hard to talk about anything really without continuously, especially if it's AD&D 1 and modules, like tournament play so much came from it. Even the way people are fooled to think AD&D 1 is a different game than what it is. Like so many people are tricked by the tournament stuff that you do hear people now arguing that the 70% that's really optional for the home game is somehow for the home game. It's raw rules is written. I'm like, that's tournament play, dude. You're calm down, right? Calm down. The lighting system, I think, even relates to the Shadow Dark stuff. So if you think lighting isn't a big issue in the game, lighting is such a big issue in dungeons, and it was meant to be. There was stuff built around it, the timing to the end of the light when light might go out and the tension it creates. So lighting is a huge issue. And it's trying to teach people how small things are removed. By removing them, you remove a major tension point. So I want to show people that it only takes a miniature change to change the entire experience. Like your whole experience of what D&D is can change from, oh, you do it this way, you do it this way. Well, your guys run in, my guys don't. Like, and just that experience, just boom. You ask my player what D&D is, they will not give you the same answer as the guy who has a completely different experience because his minor different thing just makes it easier. Like that little easier thing means he's not scared, tension gone. The experience mentally changes for the player. What D&D is no longer the same thing for both people, right? Nostalgia doesn't play well to both experiences. You'll have one guy explain it differently than the other. And you'll hear that a lot today. Ask people that both played AD&D 1, and you'll hear a varied amount of opinions. Same thing with second edition. A varied amount of different opinions for people that played the same game, right? Because of minor changes. And so you could do all these changes. That was the incredible thing and great. And I love old school for that, the freedom. And it's something when I hear raw rules is written and we pretend that somehow TSR, D&D, even AD&D 1 wasn't about freedom outside of tournament play. It's just an absolute lie. It's not a difference in my opinion versus yours. It's just not true about AD&D 1, right? Even when they say when you do it by the book, what they're really saying is if you're not doing tournament play, you follow the 30%. They can relate that to dungeon talk because within the 30% is the dungeon loop rule that you do got to follow. That is expected because that is basically it plays well into tournament play, but overall it's just the expectation of dungeon play. Now the same pressures outside of the dungeon on tournament players are not the same pressures on the home players. And the way rules are ran outside of that circle, that dungeon circle, doesn't have to be strict like it is in tournament. In tournament, it's just to make sure each player, no matter what DM they're going to, is experiencing the same thing. Where at home, outside of the dungeon loop, the experience can be different. And even within the dungeon loop, which is combat rules, some are optional, some are things that you have to take. You know what I mean? And the things that are optional can make the game more deep with weapons, or you can take it away and be less deep. And that means there might be advantages you can't take advantage of because maybe you don't use weapon speed, stuff like that. It's still a choice, right? Still a choice. And even with AD&D 1, it's still a choice. Just saying. Okay, very happy with that. I'll check it out later. Hopefully this all went well and people are more educated at one point in a few weeks when more eyeballs see this and hear this. Okay,